I still remember the exact moment I realized my family saw me as a threat, not a son, not a brother, just someone to resent. It wasn't when I bought my condo, or when I walked the graduation stage without a dime of their help. It was something far more ordinary. I was sitting at our old kitchen table, same worn-out chairs from when I was a kid, same chipped edge where my sister once threw her cereal bowl, and my mom looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're making your sister feel like a failure, Lucas. Is that what you want?" My name's Lucas. I'm 26 now. And yeah, I bought a condo last year. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy. Just a quiet place a few blocks from downtown, near my job at the marketing agency. It's the kind of spot you'd walk past without noticing. No flashy car in the driveway, no high-end finishes. But to me, it was everything. My first real foothold in life. And the first time I had something that wasn't tied to anyone else. Not my parents. Not my sister. Just me. I grew up in a smallish town, about an hour outside the city. Blue collar. Everybody knew everybody, and gossip was currency. My parents, Nora and Carl, were the type who believed appearances mattered more than reality. We weren't rich, far from it, but they'd stretch a dollar until it snapped to keep up the illusion. My dad worked at a car parts distributor, my mom was a part-time receptionist at a dental office, and every year they'd splurge on some extravagant family photo session or post our holiday ski trip photos online, even if it was just us driving up to a rental cabin for a night. It was always about the optics. Then there was my sister, Hannah, 2 years younger than me, blonde, bubbly, and somehow always the center of attention. From the time we were kids, she was the golden child. Not because she earned it. Honestly, her grades were mediocre, and she bounced from one passion to another like a ping-pong ball, but because she was loud, charming, and knew exactly how to play my parents like a fiddle. She had a way of making everything about her. If I got an A on a math test, she'd cry about how left out she felt. If I saved up to buy a new bike, she'd guilt-trip our parents until they bought her one too. Different color, slightly newer model. Every time. By the time I was 16, I'd already started working after school. First it was at a local pizza place, then I picked up a weekend shift at a grocery store. Eventually, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs just to save up for college. Not because my parents couldn't help, though they claimed things were tight, but because they flat out told me they wouldn't. "It's time you learn the value of money," my dad had said, after handing Hannah $300 for a weekend cheerleading retreat. That was the moment I stopped expecting anything from them. College was brutal. I went to a state university, lived in a shared dorm, ate ramen for dinner more times than I'd like to admit. I applied for every scholarship I could, worked at the campus library, picked up freelance gigs in graphic design just to cover textbooks. For years of grinding. No spring breaks, no parties, no safety net. But I made it. Graduated with honors. No debt. Just exhaustion. When I got my first job offer, I didn't tell my parents right away. It wasn't some grand act of rebellion. I just knew they wouldn't really care. They hadn't asked about any of my interviews or applications. When I finally mentioned it over dinner one weekend, my mom blinked like she didn't quite register what I'd said. My dad just nodded and changed the subject to how Hannah was exploring culinary school now. Her 3rd program in 2 years. So yeah, we weren't close, but I tried to stay cordial. I still showed up for birthdays, still sent cards on Mother's Day. I wasn't trying to burn any bridges. I just knew I had to build my own path if I wanted to get anywhere in life. That path eventually led me to the condo. It wasn't like I bought some downtown penthouse or posted it all over social media. I didn't even tell anyone for a few weeks, not until the paperwork was finalized. When I did, I invited my parents over for lunch. Just a casual thing, sandwiches, coffee, a little tour of the place. It was clean, minimal, modest. I had one couch, a thrift store coffee table, and a mattress on the floor. But it was mine. Every inch of it paid for with money I'd earned. My mom walked through the rooms like she was touring a crime scene. She made a noise when she saw my little kitchen, somewhere between a scoff and a sigh, and said, "Well, it's cute. A little cold, though? Don't you want something more cheerful?" My dad, always quieter, asked about the mortgage. Not to congratulate me, just to analyze. "That's a big step," he said. "Hope you didn't jump into something too fast." But the real moment that stuck with me was Hannah's reaction. She'd tagged along, wearing sunglasses indoors and flipping through her phone the entire time. She barely looked up as I showed them around, didn't say a word during lunch. Then, just as they were leaving, she turned to me with this smirk and said, Must be nice to have no life so you can afford this stuff. No one said anything. My mom gave a little laugh. My dad just shrugged like she told a joke. I stood there holding the door open, heart pounding, unsure if I should respond or just let it go. I chose to let it go. That was mistake number one. A few days later, I got a call from my mom. Not unusual. She'd been calling more since the condo tour, but something about her tone was different. She started off with some small talk, then launched into a strange little rant about family unity and how everyone's on their own journey. Then she dropped the line that would become a running theme in the months to follow. "Lucas, I think you're making Hannah feel like a failure." I blinked. "What? You've always been so independent. It's intimidating. She's struggling to find her path, and you flaunting your success isn't helping." I laughed. "I didn't mean to. It just came out." "Flaunting? Mom, I invited you over for sandwiches. That's not exactly a victory parade. You know what I mean. The condo, the job, the way you're always so smug about doing it all yourself." I didn't argue. There was no point. But something in me cracked that day. A quiet frustration that had been building for years. I'd spent a decade grinding, working 3 jobs in high school, taking out the trash at 3 a.m., pulling double shifts during midterms, and now I was being told I had to downplay my life so my sister wouldn't feel insecure? I hung up politely, said I had a meeting to get to. Then I sat on my thrift store couch for a long time, staring at the walls of my hard-won little home, trying to swallow the bitterness creeping up my throat. It was the beginning of a pattern. Over the next few months, every interaction with my family came with strings. My mom would suggest I stop talking about work around Hannah. My dad would comment on how lonely I must be living alone. Hannah herself would drop passive-aggressive lines about how she couldn't imagine wasting her 20s on spreadsheets. Then came the first truly bizarre request. My mom asked if I'd consider letting Hannah move in with me. Just for a few months, she said. Just until she figured things out. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not snapped, just shifted. And I realized this wasn't just about my sister feeling like a failure. It was about them needing someone to blame for it. And I was getting the sinking feeling they'd already chosen who that was. I didn't answer right away when Mom asked if Hannah could move in. I stalled. Said I'd think about it. And that work was hectic. I figured that would buy me time, and maybe they'd drop it. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when my family sets their sights on something, they don't ask once and move on. They circle it, pressure it, guilt it into submission. It started subtly. My mom called more often, asking how lonely I was in that big, empty condo. She never outright mentioned Hannah, not at first. Just dropped little phrases like, "You must miss having people around," or, "I bet you'd love some company," as if I was some recluse curled up in the dark. Never mind that I had friends, a solid routine, and was finally starting to feel proud of what I'd built. She made it sound like I was some sad bachelor in a cave. Then came the dinners. Every Sunday, like clockwork, I'd drive back to my parents' house for family dinner. It was a ritual we'd maintained for years, even during college when I could make it. I kept doing it mostly out of habit and some lingering sense of duty. But after the condo news, Sunday dinners got weird. At first, it was little things. My parents constantly brought up how tough Hannah's life was. How unfair it was that the job market didn't reward her creativity. She'd bounce between new ideas every other week, start a baking Instagram, apply for a dog grooming course, consider bartending school, but she never stuck with anything longer than a month. Each new venture was treated like a noble quest by my parents, while my steady job was met with half-hearted good for yous. I once mentioned that I'd been promoted to team lead at work. It was a big deal. I'd worked late nights, led a huge client campaign, and finally got the recognition. I brought it up over mashed potatoes, and my dad nodded, barely looking up from his plate. "Speaking of jobs," he said, "Hannah's thinking about starting her own online business. Something with crystals. You know, spiritual stuff. She's very passionate." My mom lit up like a Christmas tree. "Oh, and she's going to start meditating again. She just needs the right environment." Then, turning to me, "That's why your place would be perfect, Lucas. So peaceful." I blinked. "Wait, you're still on that." My mom tilted her head, as if I was the crazy one. "Honey, it just makes sense. You've got space. Stability. She needs a stepping stone. She looks up to you." "She just said last week that I was a robot in a suit," I replied. "She didn't mean it like that," my mom said with a wave. "You know how siblings are. Hannah, who was sitting across from me playing with the condensation on her glass, didn't even look up. I knew better than to press it. So I nodded, changed the subject, and let the tension stew under the surface. But the next day, I got a text from Hannah. "Hey, can I come stay for a bit? Mom said you were cool with it." No question mark. No, please. Just the assumption that I'd agreed. I stared at the message for a long time, then replied. I didn't say yes. "I'm not sure it's a good idea." She didn't reply. Instead, 2 hours later, my mom called. Her tone was tight, controlled, like she was trying to mask irritation with sweetness. "Lucas, I just don't understand. Why wouldn't you help your sister?" I tried to be polite. "Because I like living alone. Because I worked hard for this place and I want space. She's family, and I've been helping family for years," I said, my voice tightening. "But I'm not responsible for her choices." There was a long pause. Then the dagger. "Well, I guess we know who the selfish one is." I didn't say anything. I just hung up. From that moment, things got icy. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I needed space, and I didn't want to sit at a table where every accomplishment of mine was twisted into an insult. I figured some distance would cool things off. Maybe they'd reflect. Maybe they'd let it go. Instead, they doubled down. I started getting cryptic Facebook messages from extended relatives. My aunt texted me, "I hope you and your sister can work things out. Life's too short for grudges." My cousin DM'd me a meme about sharing your blessings. Even my grandmother, who barely knows how to use her phone, sent me a voice note saying, "You've always been so responsible, Lucas. Don't forget that helping others is part of being successful." It didn't take long to figure out where it was all coming from. My mom had started painting a picture that I was rich, selfish, and turning my back on my family. That poor Hannah was struggling, while her cold-hearted brother lived in a condo like some Wall Street villain. Never mind that I still ate leftovers half the week and fixed my own plumbing to avoid calling a handyman. I tried to ignore it. I really did. Until the day I came home and found a suitcase outside my door. At first I thought it was a mistake. A delivery? A neighbor's? But then I saw the tag, Hannah's name, and on top, a handwritten note on floral stationery in my mother's cursive. "Please give her a chance. She needs you." No knock. No warning. No message. They'd literally dropped her off like a package. I left the suitcase there and went inside. An hour later, I got a text from my mom. Did she get an okay? I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off my phone and sat on my couch, staring at the front door like it was a loaded weapon. A few minutes later, there was a knock. It was Hannah. Hoodie, leggings, AirPods in. She didn't look surprised to see me. Didn't look nervous or apologetic. Just annoyed. "Are you going to help me with the rest of my stuff, or what?" I didn't open the door. I spoke through it. "You're not staying here." Silence. Then, muffled, "Are you serious?" Very. There was a pause. Then a slam. Her palm, maybe her bag, against the door. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You think you're better than everyone now?" I didn't answer. Eventually, I heard footsteps retreating. I peeked through the peephole. She was dragging the suitcase back down the hall, phone to her ear, already ranting. That night, my parents both called. I didn't pick up. My voicemail was full by morning. I knew what was coming. I was the villain now. They showed up unannounced the next day. Both of them, standing at my doorstep, looking like they were staging an intervention. My mom had that thin, tight smile she wore when she was trying to act reasonable, but was actually boiling inside. My dad stood with his arms crossed, silent but imposing. "We need to talk," my mom said. I opened the door halfway. "About what?" "You breaking boundaries." "About Hannah," she said. "About this family." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We stood there, in the hallway, under the flickering ceiling light, as she launched into a speech about unity, responsibility, and how families help each other even when it's inconvenient. How I'd changed since I moved out. How Hannah was hurting, and I was making things worse. "She doesn't need a lecture," Mom said. "She needs a role model." I stared at her. "Then maybe you should have raised her like you did me." My dad's jaw twitched. That hit somewhere. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a lawyer. My parents were suing me. Technically, it was a civil dispute over emotional distress and unjust withholding of familial support. I didn't even know what half of it meant. But there it was, in black and white. They were taking me to court. Not over money. Not over property. Over the fact that I wouldn't let my sister move in. That's when I realized this wasn't just a family conflict anymore. It was war, and they'd just made the first official move. It's surreal when the people who raised you try to drag you into court, not over money you owe, or something you broke, or anything you actually did, but simply for choosing to live your own life without handing over the keys to it. I wish I could say I was surprised, but the moment I saw that letter in my mailbox, part of me just sighed, like my gut had already known this was coming. Still, I sat there on my kitchen floor for a long time, the envelope torn open beside me, just staring at the ridiculous stack of legal jargon. Unjust withholding of familial support, contributing to emotional harm through negligence. They even threw in some vague claim about verbal hostility, though they didn't have a single example. The letter wasn't from some powerhouse law firm either. It was from some local attorney named Grant Wexler. A family friend, apparently. Someone I vaguely remembered from some cookout years ago, making off-color jokes by the grill. So they'd really done it. Gone to someone they knew. Sat down, shared their twisted version of events, and convinced him to draw up this absurd legal threat. I didn't even know how to process it. Was I supposed to laugh? Cry? Rage? Instead, I picked myself up, made a cup of instant coffee, and called the one person who hadn't chosen a side, my old college roommate, Nate. Wait, what? He said after I explained. Yeah, I said, sipping the world's most bitter coffee. They're suing me because I won't let my unemployed sister move into my one-bedroom condo. There was a pause. Then he let out a slow whistle. Dude, that's next level. I haven't even had a chance to buy a couch that isn't secondhand yet. And they want me to turn my place into a halfway house for Hannah's hobbies. He didn't laugh. Nate usually had a joke for everything. But this time, he just said, "That's toxic, man." I'm sorry. That stuck with me. Toxic. I'd never put the word to it before. For years, I just called it difficult or complicated or family. But toxic? Yeah, that was starting to fit. I didn't respond to the letter right away. I wanted to be smart about this. I looked up the lawyer online, searched the court website to see if anything had actually been filed. They hadn't yet, and booked a consultation with a local attorney just to cover my bases. The guy, Mr. Ramirez, read through the letter and raised an eyebrow. They're bluffing, he said. There's no legal standing here. This isn't a case. It's emotional manipulation dressed up in legalese. Can they file it anyway? I asked. He shrugged. Technically, anyone can sue anyone for anything. Doesn't mean it'll go anywhere. But yeah, if they file, you'll have to respond. I nodded slowly. My stomach was doing cartwheels. Not because I was scared of losing. It was a ridiculous case. But because this felt like a line being crossed. Something you couldn't come back from. Still, I tried one last time. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, voice sweet like syrup. "Lucas, I'm glad you called. You sent me a lawsuit, Mom." She sighed. "It's not a lawsuit. It's a formal notice. A request to mediate. With legal threats. Because you wouldn't listen to reason," she snapped. "You've shut us out. You act like we're strangers." I rubbed my forehead. "You dropped my sister off at my door without asking. You've turned the entire family against me. You made me the villain in a story I didn't write. She's your sister. And I'm your son," I said. "Why does she matter more?" There was silence. Then, finally, she said the quiet part out loud. "Because she needs us, Lucas. You never did." That hit different. I didn't say anything. Didn't even hang up. I just let the silence stretch until she did. After that, I stopped trying to fix things. I let my lawyer handle the formal response, which basically amounted to "this is nonsense." I blocked my mom's number. I muted the family group chat, which had turned into a swamp of passive-aggressive memes and scripture quotes about forgiveness. I focused on work, on breathing, on reclaiming the peace I'd fought so hard to build. But they weren't done. About 2 weeks after I blocked them, I came home from work to find my condo door unlocked. That alone sent my heart into my throat. I knew I'd locked it. I always did. I lived alone. I triple-checked. The door wasn't open, just unlocked. I pushed it in slowly, every horror movie scene I'd ever seen flashing through my mind. The lights were off. Everything looked mostly untouched. Except the bedroom. There, in the corner, was a stack of boxes. Hannah's boxes. Shoes. Clothes. A lava lamp. A scratched-up, full-length mirror. Her stuff had been moved in. And on my bed, like some twisted cherry on top, was a pillow embroidered with the words, "Sisters make life sweeter." I stood there frozen. Not scared, just stunned. Violated. My skin felt like it didn't fit right. I backed out of the room and dialed my building's front desk. "Hi, this is Lucas from 4B, I said. "Did anyone come up to my unit today?" The woman on the other end clicked her tongue. "Oh yeah? Your mom signed in around 1 p.m. Said she had your permission." "I didn't give her permission," I said, teeth clenched. "And how did she get in?" There was a pause. "Then," said she had a key. I hung up before I lost it. I called the locksmith that night. Had all my locks changed. Upgraded to a keypad system. Canceled the old keys. Then I sat in the living room surrounded by her stuff and tried to figure out what had just happened. They'd let themselves in. Moved her in. While I was at work. Like I was some kind of chump landlord who'd finally been worn down. It felt like a full-body betrayal. But the worst part came 3 days later. I got a letter in the mail. Not legal this time. Just a plain white envelope, handwritten address. No return label. Inside was a photo. It was me at work. Sitting at a cafe near the office, sipping a coffee, laptop open. Someone had taken it from across the street. On the back, in Hannah's handwriting. "If you won't be part of the family, maybe the world should know what you're really like." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about the condo, or support, or even jealousy. It was about control. They couldn't handle the fact that I'd escaped their little ecosystem, that I wasn't bending anymore, that I had something that wasn't theirs to touch, shame, or use. So they were going to take it, one way or another. My heart was pounding. I scanned the photo for clues. Date, time, shadows, nothing obvious. But someone had followed me, taken the photo, mailed it, and they were threatening. What exactly? To expose me? For what? Having a job? Drinking coffee? I took it to the police, just to cover myself. Filed a report. They didn't take it super seriously, but they noted it. Said if I felt unsafe, I could pursue a restraining order. I wasn't there yet, but I was getting close. Then came the final blow. My boss called me into his office one Friday afternoon. He had a look on his face I didn't like. Tight smile, nervous eyes. "Lucas," he said, motioning to a chair. "We got an email this morning. Anonymous tip. Claimed you were using company resources for personal gain. Said you were moonlighting. That you were unstable." My stomach dropped. "That's not true." He nodded. "We know. HR looked into it. You're clean. But I thought you should see it." He slid a printed email across the desk. The address was fake. But the language? I knew it. I'd seen that phrasing before. In text messages. Family group chats. My mom's overly formal, passive-aggressive style. The same kind of polite venom she used when writing church newsletters. They were trying to sabotage my job. That's when it stopped being painful and started being personal. I left the office shaking, not from fear, but from fury. My world had been small for so long. Head down. Work hard. Don't rock the boat. I thought that would be enough. But they'd crossed a line. They broke into my home. Tried to ruin my career. Sent threats. Lies. Manipulated the people around me until I was surrounded by whispers and side eyes. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. But to get that, I was going to have to make them regret ever thinking I was someone they could control. And I had the perfect plan to do it. There's a moment when your brain just shuts down to protect you. Not in a dramatic, fall to your knees kind of way, but more like a dimmer switch. The lights are still on, but everything feels distant. Muted. Like you're watching your life through a dusty window, and all you can do is stare. That's how I felt walking home after the meeting with my boss. It wasn't just the email. It was the realization that they had crossed every single line. Home, family, work. There wasn't a single corner of my life they hadn't tried to invade. Not one boundary they hadn't steamrolled over. And worst of all, there was no remorse. No hesitation. Just this smug belief that I owed them something. And if I didn't pay up, they had the right to destroy me. I don't know how long I stood at the intersection outside my building, watching the walk signal blink. People moved past me like water. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably another voicemail or message from a relative I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly feeling entitled to mediate. I didn't look. I couldn't. When I finally got inside, the condo felt colder than usual. Not physically, just spiritually. Like some part of the place had been poisoned by what had happened. Her boxes were still stacked in the corner, even though I'd pushed them away from my bedroom and into the hallway closet. I didn't touch them. Not yet. I couldn't bear to look through them. Not because I cared about the stuff, but because I knew it was all part of their setup. A message. A claim. A trap. They wanted me to explode. to fight back irrationally, to do something they could point to and say, "See, he's the problem." But I didn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I shut down. For the next few days, I went into full autopilot mode. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. I kept to myself at the office, avoided casual conversation, ducked out early when I could. I stopped answering texts from everyone, friends, coworkers, even Nate. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I couldn't explain what was happening without sounding like I was losing it. My parents are trying to ruin my life because I wouldn't let my sister live with me. Who was going to understand that? My fridge was mostly empty. I lived off protein bars and microwaved rice. I didn't even play music or turn on the TV. I just needed silence. And for a while, that silence swallowed me whole. But even in that silence, some part of me was quietly shifting. Something deeper than anger was taking root. Resolve. Because once you hit the bottom, once you realize there's nothing left to salvage, you stop trying to patch holes. You start thinking about escape. Not the kind where you run away and start fresh with a fake name in another city, but the kind where you sever ties so cleanly they never grow back. I was done playing the good son. Done being the bigger person. Done tiptoeing around Hannah's ego and my parents' delusions. I was going to walk away, but I was going to do it on my terms. It started small. I went through my phone and removed every contact I didn't trust. Family members, childhood friends, old neighbors, anyone who'd ever liked one of Hannah's passive-aggressive Facebook posts or sent me a guilt-laced message. Gone. I didn't block them. That would be too obvious. I just removed them. Silently. Cleanly. Out of my life. Then I backed up everything important, documents, photos, legal records, onto 2 separate drives. One I kept in the condo. The other I left with Nate, who I finally texted with a simple, "Going through something heavy. We'll explain soon. Just need you to hold this for me." He didn't ask questions. Just replied, "Got you." After that, I started researching. I'd never been the kind of person to think about legal leverage. I always assumed justice was for people who screamed the loudest. But I started reading, looking up laws, harassment, unlawful entry, defamation, cyberstalking, tenant protections. I documented everything, took photos of her stuff in my closet, saved the photo of myself from the creepy envelope, screenshot every voicemail and message from extended family. And then I went to the property management office. "I need to know if anyone else has access to my unit," I said. The woman behind the counter blinked. "Just whoever you authorized on your form." I had a feeling. "Could you print me a copy of that?" She tapped a few keys, then handed me a sheet. There it was, in my own handwriting, from when I first signed the lease. Emergency contact, Nora Bennett, mother. And a little checked box next to access in emergencies. They'd used that. They'd twisted that single line into permission to break into my home. I scratched her name off right there and asked to replace it with Nate's. "I also need to know," I added, "if there are any security camera logs from the lobby on the 14th. She nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. "You want to file an incident report?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, I do." That night, I sat in the middle of my living room and just stared at the walls. Not crying, not shaking, just breathing. I had a plan now. A slow one, a smart one, but a plan. And the moment that confirmed I was doing the right thing, that came 3 nights later. I'd just come home late from work, took on a double shift to clear my head, and found a note taped to my door. No envelope. Just a single sheet of notebook paper written in thick black Sharpie. "You can change the locks, but not who you are. You'll always be alone, Lucas. And when you are, we'll still be a family. She'll always come home to us. You're the one who'll be forgotten." No signature, but the handwriting? Unmistakably my mother's. And the word choice, forgotten, was something she used often, usually when scolding people in church for forgetting their roots. I stood there holding the note in one hand, the doorknob in the other, and just felt this overwhelming stillness wash over me. They weren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They were trying to erase me, make me doubt myself, my worth, my right to choose a different path. That's when I realized something brutal but honest. They didn't want me to succeed. Not unless I did it on their terms. Not unless they could take partial credit. Not unless it somehow fit the narrative they'd constructed, that Hannah was the delicate flower and I was the sturdy trellis holding up the family. The moment I stepped outside that role, I became a threat. And so they decided to crush me. But I wasn't going to let them. The next day, I called a different lawyer. Not to defend myself, but to go on the offense. I told him everything. Every step. Every message. Every invasion. He listened, asked questions, and finally said something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. You've got a case, Lucas. Possibly several. He outlined options. Protection orders. Civil harassment claims. Even damages, if I wanted to pursue them. I didn't decide right away. I still wasn't sure I wanted a legal fight. But I felt the weight start to lift. Because now, I wasn't just surviving. I was building an escape. And when I made my next move, when I finally burned the bridge they kept dragging me across, I wanted it to be loud enough that they'd feel the heat from miles away. But first, I had to walk all the way down, to the very bottom. And once I was there, I'd light the match myself. The rise didn't start with a promotion or some grand moment of vindication. It started with an email. It was from a woman named Maya, an HR manager from a different division of my company. Someone I'd interacted with maybe once, during a project kickoff 2 years ago. Her subject line was simple. Hey Lucas, are you okay? I almost deleted it. By that point, I was so used to emails carrying hidden knives that I flinched just reading my name. But something about her tone felt different. When I opened it, I saw a few lines that stopped me cold. I know there's been a lot of noise around you lately. I just want you to know some of us see what's happening. And we know who you really are. Let me know if you want to grab coffee sometime. No pressure. It wasn't a job offer or a rescue mission. But it was the first time in months that someone extended kindness without strings. And it cracked something open in me. A door I'd been holding shut with both hands. We met at a quiet cafe near the company campus the following week. I didn't dress up. I didn't try to spin anything. I just showed up. Maya was warm, grounded, sharp. She didn't pry, just listened, asked a few questions, nodded when I explained what had happened with my family. The lawsuit, the break-in, the photo. She didn't gasp or clutch her pearls. She just looked me in the eyes and said, "That's abuse. No sugarcoating. No walking on eggshells. Just the truth," said plainly. I think that's when I realized I'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to say it. After that conversation, something in me shifted. I started sleeping again. Not all night, and not always peacefully, but enough. I started showing up to work on time, leaving my headphones out, joining group chats again. People noticed. Quietly, respectfully. No big, welcome back moment. But the tension around me started to fade. Even my boss pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Glad to see you firing on all cylinders again, Lucas. Keep it up." But the real win came 2 weeks later. I got offered a new role. A promotion, technically, but it was more than that. It was a transfer to the corporate strategy team. A different department, different floor, different culture. It came with a raise, better hours, and, most importantly, a fresh start. I accepted it within an hour. The very next day, I moved my desk, packed up my things. No dramatic farewell, just a polite email thanking my old team. But when I left the floor, I felt like I was shedding an old skin, leaving behind the version of me that had been on the defensive for far too long. With the new role came a new rhythm. Meetings were sharper. Projects were bigger. I was surrounded by people who were strategic, ambitious, and quietly supportive. Nobody asked about my personal life. Nobody hinted at drama. It was just about the work. And I was good at the work. I didn't just survive, I excelled. My first quarter, I streamlined a cross-department initiative that saved the company 6 figures. I presented directly to the VP twice. My name started showing up in internal newsletters. Clients began requesting me by name. My manager, an icy but brilliant woman named Rena, pulled me aside after a presentation and said, "If you keep this up, you'll be in my chair within 2 years." I'd never heard something like that from someone in authority, not even close. While my professional life took off, I quietly kept tending to my personal escape plan. I had the security footage from the day my parents broke into my condo. I had screenshots of messages from family members encouraging me to just let her stay and mocking my boundaries. I had copies of the creepy anonymous email to my job and a timeline matching it to my mom's Facebook activity. My lawyer had everything. And together, we drafted a cease and desist. It wasn't just for my parents. It was for Hannah too. All 3 of them. One neat little package. It wasn't aggressive. Just clear. Legal. A formal notice that any further contact, defamation, or harassment would result in immediate legal escalation. I sent it by certified mail, email, and a private courier. 3 days of silence followed. Then came the expected explosion. Hannah posted a long, dramatic rant on Instagram about being betrayed by people who pretend to care and having to rebuild your life from ashes. She didn't name me, but the message was clear. It had a picture of her crying, her face strategically lit for maximum sympathy. It got 73 likes. My mom posted a quote from some televangelist about the sin of unforgiveness. I didn't respond. I was done speaking their language. Around this time, I decided to start therapy. It was something I'd thought about for years, but always put off. Too expensive, too time-consuming, too vulnerable. But now, with my new role and better income, I could afford it. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to sit with someone and talk. Her name was Dr. Elise. Mid-40s. Soft voice, but sharp eyes. She saw right through me in the first session. Didn't push, just waited. And eventually, I opened up. I told her everything. The jobs I worked as a teenager. The way my parents made me feel like success was a dirty secret I wasn't allowed to enjoy. The way Hannah always managed to twist the spotlight back onto herself. The lawsuit. The note. The photo. She listened. And when I was done, she said something that stuck with me. Lucas, you were raised in a family that taught you love was conditional. That your value came from what you could give, not who you were. And the moment you stopped giving, they turned on you. It hit me in the chest. Because she was right. All my life, I thought if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved myself enough, they'd finally see me. But they never wanted to see me. They wanted to own me. Therapy became a ritual. Once a week. Rain or shine. Sometimes I talked. Sometimes I just sat in silence until something spilled out. But slowly, the knots in my chest began to untangle. The anger softened. The shame faded. And what replaced it wasn't forgiveness. It was clarity. And that clarity gave me power. I stopped checking their social media. I removed old photos from my phone. I took down the framed family picture in my hallway and replaced it with a skyline print I'd been eyeing for months. My home finally felt like mine. Then, something wild happened. I got invited to speak on a panel. Maya had recommended me for an industry event, a breakout session on young leaders and resilience in corporate environments. I almost said no. The idea of standing on a stage and talking about myself felt like walking naked through fire. But I said yes, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions I'd ever made. I didn't tell my whole story, of course, but I shared what I could. About burnout, boundaries, starting over, finding your voice when others try to steal it. People clapped. Some even lined up after to thank me. One young guy, maybe 24, pulled me aside and said, "My parents are the same way." I didn't know anyone else went through that. I shook his hand, looked him in the eye, and said, "You're not alone. And you're not crazy." That moment, that was the real turning point. Because I realized I'd made it out. Not perfectly, not without scars. But I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And every day, I chose me. A few weeks after the panel, I got a promotion offer. Not just internal this time, external. A headhunter reached out about a senior strategy role at a fast-growing firm. Bigger salary, more freedom, remote-friendly. They'd seen me at the event and were impressed. I took it. I gave my notice with a full month's grace period. Helped train my replacement. Left with handshakes and glowing recommendations. And the day I walked out of that building for the last time, I didn't look back. Because I had somewhere better to be. The new job didn't feel like a job. It felt like stepping into an entirely different world. Gone were the beige cubicles, the passive-aggressive emails, the shallow culture that rewarded obedience over originality. This new firm, Solace Strategies, was lean, sharp, and unapologetically ambitious. They didn't want you to fit in. They wanted you to stand out. I was brought on as a senior strategy consultant, tasked with leading multi-million-dollar client projects from end to end. It was high pressure, fast-paced, but for the first time in my life, I thrived under it. I wasn't just another cog in the wheel. People came to me for answers, for guidance, for decisions, and I gave them results. Within 3 months, I had turned around a failing logistics project for a Fortune 500 client. By month 4, I was on a first-name basis with the executive director. By month 6, the COO pulled me into his office, closed the door, and said, "We want to fast-track you. Director level. You've got the mind for it, and more importantly, the spine." I wasn't ready to accept that promotion yet, but I was ready to use it, because with power comes leverage, and I was about to use mine. It started, strangely enough, with Hannah. Again, One of Solace's new side projects was a market viability study for up-and-coming creators and influencers. Our client, a global content monetization platform, wanted to understand how lifestyle creators were monetizing short-form content and what kind of growth potential they had. As part of that, we had access to a massive analytics database, ad revenue breakdowns, engagement rates, audience growth models, even private flag reports. And one of the names that popped up? Hannah Bennett. At first, I stared at the name, assuming it had to be someone else. But there she was. Same handle as the Instagram she'd used to accuse me of being toxic. Same tear-filled selfies. Same pastel captions about finding yourself and family betrayal. Apparently, she'd monetized the drama. There were affiliate links to self-help journals, sponsored posts for online therapy apps, even a GoFundMe titled, "Starting Over After Abuse." It had raised over $11,000. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was impressed. She'd turned our family war into a brand. But here's where it got dark. One of the private flag reports, an internal tool used by the platform to track suspicious behavior, had a red marker next to her name. Inauthentic claims. Manipulated narrative. Violation of TOS under review. Apparently, someone had reported her for weaponizing family stories for personal gain, particularly her false claims of being evicted by her abusive brother and having no access to housing. The platform had opened a soft investigation, but it had stalled without further evidence. Evidence I had. I bookmarked everything. Every flagged post. Every dollar raised. I downloaded a copy of her GoFundMe pitch, her influencer pitch deck. Yes, she had won. And even the weirdly dramatic video she posted where she cried on camera, talking about how I stole her safe space. All of it, documented. Not to use yet. Just collected. Because if I was going to go down this path, I needed to be surgical. Around this time, my lawyer, Andrew Ramirez, called with an update. They've stopped responding, he said. No contact from their lawyer in over a month. Not even a reply to the cease and desist. Dead quiet. So what does that mean? I asked. It means they're either regrouping, or they think you've moved on. I leaned back in my chair, staring out my high-rise window. The city looked so small from up here. I haven't, I said. He laughed softly. I figured. You want to go scorched earth? Not yet. But I want to make sure the earth's nice and dry when I do. That's when we started building the second file. See, there's a difference between fighting a legal battle and building a case. Most people throw punches the second they get hit. But I'd learned. You don't fight when you're still bleeding. You wait. You heal. You grow stronger. And then you crush. The second file was for civil damages. Not just harassment, but defamation, reputational harm, emotional distress. We gathered statements from my employer, both former and current. Testimony from my building's property manager about the break-in. Documentation of the therapy costs I'd incurred as a direct result of their behavior. I even had a forensic tech pull metadata from the creepy photo they sent of me at the cafe. It was all admissible, and it all pointed to one thing. Premeditated sabotage. But even with all that, something still held me back. I didn't want revenge just for the sake of revenge. I wanted to be free. And every time I thought about launching a lawsuit, I asked myself, would it help me move on? Or just tie me to them longer? So instead of pulling the trigger, I made a different move. I contacted someone from my past. My uncle, Daniel. He was my mom's estranged younger brother, 10 years her junior, and the black sheep of the family. He'd been pushed out years ago after a fight over inheritance. I'd only seen him a few times as a kid, but I remembered his dry wit and his refusal to take anyone's nonsense. I found him through LinkedIn of all places. He ran a small real estate development firm out of North Carolina. I sent a short message, not expecting much. Hi, Uncle Daniel. Not sure if you remember me. It's Lucas, Nora's son. I'd love to catch up, if you're open to it. He replied within 2 hours. Of course I remember you. Your mother hasn't poisoned all my brain cells yet. What's on your mind? We scheduled a call. What started as a catch-up turned into something much more. Daniel, as it turned out, had his own file. He'd kept receipts for decades. Financial abuse, backstabbing, manipulation. My mom had cut him out of the family years ago, spinning a story about how he'd tried to steal from their father's estate. But Daniel had documentation showing it was her who forged a signature on a bank transfer and had him blamed for it. I let it go, he said, because I was tired of the drama. But seeing you go through it, Feels like history repeating itself. We talked for 2 hours that first night. Then we started emailing, trading notes, sharing receipts. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were witnesses. Together, we began assembling a third file. This one wasn't for court. This one was for truth. We wrote a letter, not to send, but to exist. A full, documented account of Nora Bennett and the lies she'd spun over 3 decades. We called it the Legacy Project, a dry joke that made us both chuckle. And once it was done, we agreed on a single principle. If they ever came for me again, we would go public. Not with rage, with fact. Around this time, something else happened. Something small, quiet, but it cracked a layer of ice I didn't know I still had. Maya, the HR manager who first reached out to me months ago, invited me to a housewarming party. She'd just moved into a new place in the city, and a bunch of people from work were going. Normally, I'd say no. Crowds weren't my thing. Not anymore. But this time I said yes. And I'm glad I did. The night was easy, warm, real. No one asked about my family. No one tried to corner me with pity. People laughed, shared stories, passed drinks. Maya pulled me into a conversation with some of her college friends, and I found myself talking about things that had nothing to do with trauma. Music, movies, hiking spots. At one point, I stepped onto the balcony with my drink, just to take a breath. Maya joined me a moment later, leaned on the railing beside me. "Feels good, doesn't it?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, it does. You look lighter." I smiled. "I think I am." Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You know, I hope you stop waiting for them to apologize." I blinked. "I'm not." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay," I admitted. "Maybe a little." She shrugged. "They won't. And even if they did, it wouldn't be the apology you deserve. So just live. That's the best revenge." I didn't say anything, but I felt it. Something inside me shift again. She was right. Revenge wasn't just about making them pay. It was about making them irrelevant. And I was almost there. Almost. But before I could let go completely, I had one last thing to do. One final move. A checkmate they wouldn't see coming. I knew revenge would never give me back the years I lost. It wouldn't erase the 3 job nights from high school. Wouldn't undo the silent birthdays during college while Hannah's every whim was celebrated like a royal coronation. Wouldn't patch the hollow feeling I'd carried in my chest after the lawsuit, the break-in, or the creepy photo sent anonymously to my mailbox. But I didn't want those years back. I wanted to send a message. And not just any message. A clean, quiet, undeniable one. Something so calm and calculated they'd feel it in their bones every time they refreshed a page, opened an inbox, or walked into a room where their name had been adjusted. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about making someone cry. It's about making them irrelevant. And with every step I'd taken, the condo, the new job, the connections, the files, I'd positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. Above them. Untouchable. But still watching. It started with Hannah's brand. That sad, pastel-colored empire she'd built on top of my reputation. She'd monetized victimhood, using my name, and a twisted version of our history, to drive sympathy clicks. She'd earned over $11,000 through GoFundMe alone. Her TikTok was full of soft-spoken story times about being abandoned by her emotionally abusive older brother. She sold affiliate links to journals, therapy prompts, healing crystals, all wrapped in that nauseating veneer of faux enlightenment. What she didn't realize was that her monetization platform had strict policies about fraudulent emotional appeals, especially if they involved defamation or demonstrably false narratives. And she had violated nearly all of them. I waited until I had everything. I didn't just report her. I documented her. A full file, sourced and organized. Screenshots, video clips, timestamps, financial inconsistencies, contradictions in her story over time. A list of items in her recovery journey, GoFundMe, that I could prove were either lies or had already been gifted to her years before. Then I made an anonymous submission to the platform's internal review board, along with a copy sent directly to their legal compliance team. No emotion, no ranting, just 22 pages of cold, cross-referenced truth. 2 weeks later, Hannah's monetized content was demonetized. GoFundMe froze her payout, pending investigation. Her affiliate links stopped working. Her TikTok? Shadow banned. And I didn't even touch her directly. Just lifted the curtain. She went ballistic on Instagram, of course. Posted black squares. Cryptic captions talked about how haters will always try to steal your voice when you speak your truth. But the algorithm didn't care. Her engagement dropped by 70% in 10 days. Her DMs turned on her. Even some of her old supporters started to question her stories. But that was only phase 1. Phase 2 involved my mother, the queen manipulator. The woman who once spent $400 on Hannah's high school prom dress and then told me there wasn't room in the budget for a second-hand tie when I asked for help buying clothes for my job interview. I knew her weakness, reputation. My mom didn't care about money, not really. She cared about image, church circles, Facebook likes, what people said about her in whispers behind closed doors. She had curated a persona of the long-suffering, spiritual matriarch for years. So I hit her there. It started with a single, perfectly timed leak. Remember Uncle Daniel? The so-called black sheep of the family? He still had ties to a few people back in our hometown. One of them, a local real estate broker, also sat on the board of the same church committee my mom boasted about in every Christmas letter. He offered to share some documents anonymously. What documents? Oh, just the ones Daniel and I had compiled showing how my mother misrepresented an old inheritance dispute. Forged a signature. Pushed Daniel out. Then told everyone he was the thief. The leak was subtle. A manila envelope placed discreetly in the church office mailbox. No return address. No explanation. Just facts. Within days, whispers started. I didn't hear it directly, of course. I wasn't there. But my cousin texted me a week later out of nowhere. Dude, I think your mom's in serious trouble. People are talking. Did you do something? I didn't reply, because by then, phase 3 had already begun. And that one was for me. See, after the cease and desist, my parents had gone quiet. Not out of remorse, out of calculation. They were waiting to see if I'd eventually come crawling back. They'd done it before. Pulled back just enough to make me think maybe things were getting better. Then, when I opened the door again, they'd strike harder. But not this time. Because now I had a plan that didn't involve confrontation. It involved erasure. I filed a formal request for a legal name change. Not first and last, just a slight modification to my middle and last. Still recognizably me, but enough to sever all legal ties. I switched my digital footprint. New professional email, new portfolio URL, updated LinkedIn with my new branding. I informed HR, payroll, banks. Every official record. In one coordinated week, I scrubbed myself from their reach. Then I quietly sold the condo. Yep, the same place I fought so hard to protect. But not out of defeat, out of strategy. The moment I closed on the sale, I signed a lease in a city 2 hours away, closer to my new firm's East Division HQ. A sleek apartment overlooking the river. New building, fresh start, security-keyed elevators. And most importantly, no one knew where I lived. Not Hannah, not my parents, not a single cousin. I even changed my phone number. Gave it to only 3 people, Nate, Maya, and my lawyer. And on the very last day, right before I moved out, I opened that hall closet, the one where I'd shoved Hannah's old boxes. I took them downstairs and left them on the curb, not with a note, not with bitterness, just gone, like her access to my life. Gone. The final phase was the quietest of all. It was a letter, written on heavy stock paper, delivered by certified mail, addressed to my parents. Inside, there was no emotion, no plea for reconciliation, no accusations, just a single-page, notarized letter. Effective immediately, all communication directed toward me, my employer, my residence, or any affiliated party will be considered harassment under applicable state law. I have taken appropriate steps to ensure legal boundaries are in place. Any further violation will be met with a formal response through the appropriate channels. We are no longer family. Do not contact me again. It was clean, brutal, final, and it felt incredible. I imagined my mother reading it at the kitchen table, mouth thin, trying to figure out how to spin it to her church friends. I imagined my father, silent as always, reading it and knowing he'd burned the last bridge with the only child who ever showed up without needing a bailout. I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. Not the screaming kind. The quiet kind. The kind you feel when you walk out of a toxic building and breathe fresh air for the first time in a decade. And the best part? I never had to look back. I didn't need them to grovel. Didn't need them to apologize. I had made it. Without them. Despite them. Above them. And they knew it. Every time they opened Facebook and didn't see my name. Every time Hannah posted a story time that got 3 likes instead of 3,000. Every time a family gathering passed and someone whispered, "Whatever happened to Lucas?" They knew. I won. And they lost access to the best thing they never deserved. Me. Fallout came slowly. Not with a bang. Not with a screaming match or slammed doors or someone pounding on my new front step in the rain. No. It came the way rot creeps into a tree. Silently, thoroughly, until the thing is hollow and only pretending to stand tall. The first sign was the silence. After I sent that final letter, the one declaring, in precise legal terms, that I was done, my lawyer confirmed delivery within 72 hours. I didn't get a response, and I didn't expect one. What surprised me was that even the indirect noise stopped. No cousin DMs. No subtweets. No cryptic Facebook status about losing a son to pride. Nothing. It was eerie. But it was also exactly what I wanted. They weren't quiet because they'd found peace. They were quiet because they didn't know what to do without access. I was no longer fuel for their drama machine. And without me, the engine stalled. 3 weeks after I moved, Nate sent me a screenshot from the old family group chat, the one I'd muted months ago and eventually left without a word. Apparently, Hannah had tried to revive it by posting a long, meandering message about family legacy and how forgiveness was the cornerstone of healing. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. It was obvious. Only one person replied. My cousin Ben. He simply wrote, "Maybe if you hadn't lied about him to 100,000 strangers, he'd still be around." After that, she didn't post again. Another week passed, and I got a tip. Not from anyone I expected, but from Daniel. He called me out of the blue. "Thought you'd want to know," he said, chewing on something. "Your mom and Hannah had a bit of a falling out." I raised an eyebrow. "Over what?" He chuckled. Apparently, someone from the church board confronted Nora. Asked if it was true that she tried to cover up a forgery years ago involving Grandpa's estate. "You remember those documents we put together?" "Yeah." Well, the story got around. Quietly, but fast. "And Hannah?" "She blamed your mom for ruining her platform," he said. Said if Nora hadn't escalated things with the lawsuit and the condo break-in, none of this would have happened. "And your mom?" "Well," she finally snapped. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "Let me guess. They turned on each other." "Yup. Like wolves in a cage." It wasn't satisfying in the way I thought it might be. I didn't feel triumph. Just clarity. Confirmation. They never had loyalty to each other. Only codependence. As long as they had a common enemy. Me. They had purpose. But without that, they started devouring each other. That was when the unraveling truly began. I heard, through Daniel and a few other carefully filtered sources, that my mom's standing in the church had slipped. The woman who used to organize fundraisers and MC holiday pageants had quietly stepped down from all of it. Rumor was she'd been encouraged to take a break by the board. People were asking too many questions. Whispers spread. About the inheritance. About the lawsuit. About Hannah's mysterious GoFundMe disappearing overnight. She stopped posting Bible quotes online. Stopped commenting on old family photos. She retreated, slowly, into herself. But Hannah? She imploded. One of her old supporters, a former trauma coach she used to collaborate with, publicly accused her of lying about her backstory to gain clout. Posted screenshots of Hannah admitting, in private, that her brother wasn't abusive, just uptight, and that the whole abandonment narrative had been exaggerated for engagement purposes. That post spread like wildfire. Commenters dragged up old inconsistencies in her story. Side-by-sides of conflicting timelines. Archived videos where she contradicted herself. Her follower count started bleeding by the thousands. Sponsorships dropped. Her links went dead. And the cherry on top? GoFundMe issued a statement after concluding their investigation. They refunded over $10,000 to donors. Quietly, without naming her. But those in the loop knew. She vanished from the internet 2 days later. Not rebranded. Not pivoted to healing. Vanished. No more posts. No new accounts. Just gone. The only trace left was a now-deleted Reddit thread where someone asked, "Whatever happened to that girl who cried on TikTok about her evil brother kicking her out?" One of the replies. Turns out she was the evil one. But even with all that, with their reputations crumbling and their narratives collapsing, I didn't gloat. I didn't poke the ashes. I just lived. I flourished, actually. The new job became more than a career. It became a launch pad. I wasn't just working at Solace anymore. I was leading. Within 6 months of taking the role, I was overseeing a small team. By the end of the year, I was directing strategy for a 7-figure portfolio. People trusted me, respected me, looked to me, and not once did I have to sacrifice who I was to earn that. Outside of work, things bloomed too. I kept seeing Maya. At first it was just coffee, then long walks by the river, then quiet dinners where we shared things we didn't talk about with anyone else. She never pushed, never tried to fix me. She just listened. And one night, while we were sitting on the balcony of my apartment, her feet tucked under her, a blanket draped over both of us, she said something that echoed louder than anything I'd ever heard. You didn't just survive them, Lucas. You outgrew them. She was right. I'd spent so long trying to win their approval, trying to prove that I was worthy of love, of belonging. But the truth was, I was trying to bloom in poisoned soil. The only way to thrive was to replant myself. And I had. Every part of my life now felt chosen, not inherited, not handed down with guilt, not weighed down by someone else's expectations. I had chosen my peace, my people, myself, and the world hadn't ended. It had only begun. Months passed. Seasons changed. My past faded into the background like a town you drive away from and never look back on. Then, one last thing happened. One final ripple in the pond. I got a letter in the mail. Not certified, not formal, just a regular envelope. Handwritten address. From my dad. I stared at it for a long time. I almost threw it away. But curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No closing. Just a short message written in his stiff, utilitarian handwriting. Your mom's not doing well. She barely speaks anymore. Hannah's living with her again. They're both different now. Quieter. I'm not asking for anything. Just thought you should know. See. I read it twice. Then folded it. Slid it into a drawer. And walked away. Because there's silence now, it wasn't mine to fix. It was theirs to live with. And I had nothing left to say. I closed that chapter with no anger, no bitterness, no second thoughts. Just 7 words spoken out loud to the empty room. You don't get to hurt me anymore.